Tennessee football is a national championship dark horse contender, according to this one former coach and media personality. It's interesting because I would just drop the dark horse on that and call them a national championship contender. That and so much more. It's your Friday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy Friday, your unofficial start to the weekend here on this tailgate that we like to call Locked On Vols. Appreciate you guys for being here and appreciate FanDuel Sportsbook for being a part of the show. New customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Appreciate you everydayers for stopping by the show here today. We got a lot to get into, a lot of football conversations and some reactions from some stories that are out there. I talked about in the cold open there, and it's Urban Meyer calling Tennessee a dark horse contender for a national championship in 2026. We'll discuss that, if he's right or wrong. What players are costing in the transfer portal? What demands, outrageous demands, are they asking for in the transfer portal? What position players, or position groups, I should say, are hardest to hold on to? A really, really good article, kind of a mock-up from so many different sources that Pete Nakos over at On3 did, and we're going to react to that. Some of these are just truly incredible. And if we have time, I do want to hit on a conversation that's been kind of talked about and passed around in football circles the last couple of months. Should college football do away with spring practice and go to an NFL OTA style for the months of July and June? That's coming up here on a Friday Locked On Vols. All right, so first and foremost, it's funny, I'm not shy about who I don't like in the coaching realm. I don't like Brian Kelly. I mentioned that a couple of times throughout this show, or throughout this week or two. I absolutely despise Urban Meyer. Brian Kelly's a 10 out of 10, in my opinion, compared to Urban Meyer, and I don't like either one of them. But I will say this, Urban Meyer, I thought, does a fantastic job on Big Noon Kickoff. I thought it was absolutely hilarious when he lasted, 7-8 games with the Jacksonville Jaguars, because he went in there and acted like he knew better than the entire league, and I'm not a fan of Urban Meyer. However, but it was Urban Meyer who was on a recent podcast, the Triple Option podcast with Rob Stone and Mark Ingram, looking ahead to the 2025 season, and they were kind of going through and giving their college football playoff predictions and national championship predictions. I mean, really, we're in the month of February. We're doing it here on this show. It is a very much look ahead. And when it got to Urban Meyer, instead of giving a 4-team, 6-team, 12 teams, whatever, he kind of started the conversation off by letting everybody know who his dark horse candidate is. He said, quote, Nico Iamaleava, the quarterback at Tennessee. I remember when I first started studying them last fall, I called Brady Quinn and Matt Leinart, and I said, what am I missing here? This guy looks like a bona fide. He looks like Aaron Rodgers. The ball comes out of his hand like a tennis ball. So we called Tennessee a dark horse contender. Quote, he got really inconsistent, and that team got a little inconsistent, and they still had a heck of a year. If that kid grows as a quarterback, I asked the question after watching, and I know he wasn't playing great teams, but just his physical ability, his size, his speed, his athleticism, the way the ball comes out of his hands, I saw him as a high first-round draft pick. Now it remains to be seen, but I'll pick Tennessee in regards to a dark horse contender for the 2025, I guess it'd be technical 26 national championship. So a couple of things here, first and foremost. One, sure, there were some easy games on Tennessee's schedule, but Tennessee still, beat Florida, which everybody was just loving towards the end of the season, right? Tennessee beat Alabama, which everybody and their mother was advocating for Alabama to be in the college football playoff. So there were still some decent wins on that schedule. I mean, you play a Southeastern Conference slate, there's going to be decent wins on that schedule. My question is, what is a dark horse, all right? You go to, Webster.com or whatever it is, and you pull up the definition of dark horse. Dark horse is a candidate or competitor about whom little is known, but who unexpectedly wins or succeeds. So I think it's a little interesting in terms that he used the word dark horse, because everybody knows about Nico. Everybody knows about the University of Tennessee, okay? Especially coming off a college football playoff appearance this past season. Everybody knows about the roster. I think dark horse was kind of the wrong term. Maybe sleeper would have been used. So he could have been using dark horse in terms of, Well, everybody knows about the Texases and the Georgias and the Ohio States and the Alabamas usually in this conversation, so on and so forth. Let me give you another one. Maybe he was talking about dark horse of those top 1 and 2 tiers in college football. I don't know. I would have used the word maybe sleeper because, again, there's not a college football fan in the country that doesn't know the name Nico Iamaleava. There's not a college football fan in the country that doesn't know what Tennessee's been doing the last 4 years. So I think dark horse is not the appropriate term here. But nonetheless, Urban Meyer is giving a lot of praise to Tennessee, mostly because he loves the quarterback in Nico Iamaleava. And what he says here, if he takes a step, I think he's a bona fide star. I mean, I completely agree. I expect Nico Iamaleava to take a step this offseason. If he does not take a step this offseason, then Tennessee, I feel like, is not going to reach its full potential, and it's going to be kind of wishy-washy in 2025. I was talking to, it was Chase Thomas, off the air yesterday before I had him on the show, and we were going back and forth, and I was like, do you remember Eric Ainge's junior year when he had Meacham and Swain and Smith and all these weapons? And then his senior year, that was his best year. He threw 35 touchdowns, a couple of picks. I mean, he had it might actually been more than a couple of picks, but he had 35 touchdowns. That was a career high for him in a single season. And I want to say, yeah. And nonetheless, that was his best year. And it's because he took a step in that offseason. He took a step his 3rd to 4th year in the program, and he could overcompensate losing so many weapons. And I think Nico has all the ability in the world to do just that. And you couple that with you're still going to have a lot of talent in the backfield. I love the makeup of the tight ends. Somebody's going to step up a wide receiver. And to be completely frank, I'm not trying to be rude. It's not like the wide receiver position can be much worse, all right? You feel me? I mean, I'm just keeping it real here. That position group has not been where it needs to be, and I've said this a couple of times compared to where it was the first couple of years. And then you throw into the defense. Sure, you lose James Pierce, Keenan Peely, who missed half the season already, Will Brooks, a safety. Jermon McCoy's banged up, but he will play at some point, right? Hopefully towards the beginning of the season. You are bringing back so much on the defensive end. So that defense, in my opinion, is going to pick up right where it left off in 2025. Now, we know the next step is, hey, in big games, at Georgia, in the college football playoffs against Ohio State, you got to have a pulse. You got to show up, right? You've got to show up. And that's offense, defense, special teams all involved. But I think because of the defense and what you have coming back next year and that expected step that I think Nico will take simply because he's played a lot of football now, right? He knows what to expect. He knows what that clock is. He knows that sometimes your tackles are going to let you down. The ability to use his legs and extend plays and stuff like that. I wholeheartedly expect that Nico is going to take a step this offseason. Because of that, I think Tennessee's a contender. And then again, we can have the other conversation, what truly values in terms of a contender for a national championship. Is it making the college football playoff? I thought making the field this year means you were a contender, you were in the running to win a championship. Turns out, no, there were a couple of teams in that playoff this year that, not to say they didn't have any business being in the field, because I think Tennessee deserved it. I did not think Indiana deserved it. I do think that SMU, based on what happened, deserved it. Some of these other teams that got blown out. Who was the other team that got blown out in the first round? SMU got blown out. Tennessee got blown out. Indiana got blown out. There's a fourth team in there. Clemson. I don't think they ended up getting blown out. But nonetheless, you still deserved a seat at the table, but you weren't winning a national championship. So that's a separate conversation. But I think instead of dark horse, it should be sleeper. But any way you want to spin it, I do think Urban Meyer, given a whole lot of praise. Urban Meyer knows football, right? I mean, I might not like him, but he's won a whole lot of games. He's coached a lot of good quarterbacks. He's still a part of the media contingent to where he knows how the game is played right now. He knows what's going on. His national championship picks 1 through 3 was Texas at 1, Ohio State at 2, Oregon at 3, and then Tennessee again was his dark horse contender. What say you? Would you label Tennessee as a dark horse contender to win the 2025 national championship, or would you just say that they're a straight up contender? I know there's answers to be had at wide receiver. You got to figure out the offensive line, but again, this roster light years better than what it was 2 years ago at points in times last year. I mean, there's turnover. That's college athletics. You always got to turn over a new leaf and find new production. Tennessee baseball is about to have to do that this weekend. But I think that roster's there. I do. I would love to hear from you guys at _Caner and at Locked On Vols. Hey, when we come back, what are some of the most outrageous demands from players in the transfer portal? Who costs the most? What position groups cost the most? A really, really cool article from Pete Nakos over at On3, compiling a whole lot of interesting, juicy information. That's coming up next as we continue on here this Friday, Locked On Vols. Hey, I want to tell you guys about my friends over at Factor. Are you looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every single week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, and grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. I know how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. Trust me, they send me meals when I do these reads sometimes, and it's great. I just go out there, pop it in the microwave, couple of minutes, poke some holes in there in that outer wrapping, couple of minutes, take it off, and it's good. It's good for it. Makes me feel better. It's quick, easy, because I'm always on the go. I'm always running around, and they really is stressful, or stressless. I should say non-stressful. Whatever phrasing I'm trying to say right now, to be free of stress is that is what Factor Meals is all about. The convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess. Just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 off. Use that promo code lockedoncollege50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's promo code lockedoncollege50 off at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Hey guys, really interesting article over there at On3. Pete Nakos, national, he's a legal reporter, transfer portal reporter, all that and more. Does a great job, and he did a great job. He spoke with a number of collectives around the country, a couple from the SEC, a couple from the ACC, Big 10, Big 12, Group G of 5, all that and more, and some staffers as well, and kind of compiled a lot of notes here from this past transfer portal window. And it's really, really interesting to kind of go through there and see what people on the inside are truly saying about this wild, wild west. He broke it down into a number of different sections that we're going to kind of go over right now. I'm not going to read it all, obviously, but some good stuff in here. Who spent the most money on their transfer portal class? ACC personnel staffer says Oregon, Ohio State, Miami, Tennessee, Texas, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. Really interesting there. It said SEC NIL Collective says traditional big brands like Tennessee, Oregon, Ohio State, Texas too, they're going to spend at the top of the market year in and year out. That wasn't news to me because those guys are always going to spend. What? Tennessee's transfer portal class was 4 players, 2 of which were offensive linemen, one of which was a wide receiver that hasn't played a snap of college football. The other one is a presumed third-string running back. I'm not saying Tennessee didn't overpay to get some of those guys because they needed them. And I'm not going to pretend like I know what's going on there and those financials, but I just think that the name brand of Tennessee gets thrown around in there. Like for this offseason cycle, I don't believe that's the case. Now, if we're talking roster retention, that's another story, okay? But if we're talking straight transfer portal class, that is 100% inaccurate because Tennessee has a portal class of 4, literally of 4. A lot of these sources here are talking about Texas Tech, and one of these quotes, I can't read it up here because I'll get bleeped on YouTube, and I'll have to put the little explicit tab over there on Apple Podcasts and all that. But an SEC personnel staffer says Auburn, Michigan, Ole Miss, Texas, and Texas Tech. In theory, Tech blanked. 6-letter word, last 2 letters are ED, but that 4-letter word we all know, 6 letters, last 2 are ED, up the market for everybody, which I thought was kind of funny. Who was the highest paid player in the portal? A lot of guys are saying the Tulane transfer quarterback who went to Duke, Lenora Sellers to be retained, I would assume, at South Carolina. Carson Beck got thrown out there by pretty much every source in this article. It was Carson Beck and Darian Masai, I believe that's how you say his name, the Tulane quarterback that went to Duke. Those were the 2 names that were mentioned about the players who got paid the most. Reports here, $4 million for the Duke quarterback, $3.5 to $4 million for Carson Beck to go to Miami. What's the craziest, this is it right here, what's the craziest ask that you've had from a transfer? These are collectives they're asking, or personnel staffers. One SEC NIL collective said the requests from athletes and agents are getting pretty preposterous. Athletes asking for a $100,000 car on top of the deal, asking for a furnished 3-bedroom townhouse. Why don't you just pay us $100,000 to cover our taxes too, and private air travel for family to and from games? Boy, that'd be nice, right? I mean, while we're at it, can I get paid $200 million? You know what I'm saying? Like, that is quite the list of asks, right? An ACC NIL collective said, quote, we had someone ask for $2.8 million, 2 cars, and $200,000 living and transportation taken care of. No, we didn't get said player. I would imagine so, right? Because if you weren't gonna sign for anything less than $2.8 million, 2 cars, $200,000 in living and transportation taken care of, then yeah, I'm sure you weren't going to get those guys. Goodness gracious. Big 12 personnel staffer says, quote, everybody just asks for cars. Cars grow on trees, apparently. Normally, it's a $50,000 car. Hey, you're getting off pretty cheap there compared to some of these other collectives that are talking about. Goodness gracious. Here's some interesting stuff about roster retention. What's the hardest position to retain on the roster? SEC collective says offensive line and linebacker. Quarterback, obviously the most expensive to retain, but the hardest in terms of trying to keep people from fighting off of these positions, probably linebacker and offensive line. That's interesting. Interesting for sure. Collective 2 from the SEC says, I thought linemen got up there pretty high recently. We've all been dealing with quarterbacks, defensive linemen, corners, receivers, but to have an offensive lineman jump as high as they did was a little surprising. 3 years ago, there were collectives that weren't even compensating offensive linemen. Now, they're definitely being compensated now. Big 12 personnel staffer says this, offensive line doesn't matter if you're good or not. If you play, somebody will pay you. Last year, it was $250,000 for a good one. This year, with revenue sharing and NIL, it's a minimum $400,000 up to $750,000 and $1 million for some guys. Goodness gracious. SEC personnel staffer says you got to pay your quarterback, left tackle, and edges. Yeah, that's how you have to build every class. But the lineman isn't super shocking. We're getting to a point to where, let's see here. Okay, this next part is going to be really interesting for me. What's the hardest position to add to the roster? Let's see here. SEC NIL collective says defensive tackles are so valuable. If you get a unicorn, they get at least $1 million. What? I'm sorry. Defensive tackles are so valuable. If you get a unicorn, they're getting at least $1 million. Are you kidding me? Not at Tennessee. Again, I don't know specifics, but I can go out there and tell you right now, no defensive tackle is making $1 million at Tennessee. Holy crap. Another SEC personnel staffer says this, defensive tackles are going for $800,000. This past cycle, that was what it was. There were just so few of them, so people were overpaying. Quarterback values have doubled now at $2.5 million for a good one. If Dylan Gabriel came out right now, he'd be getting well over $4 million. Defensive tackles, $800,000. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to devalue the position of defensive tackle, but come on, guys. At least at Tennessee, you play 12 defensive linemen. If we're talking about an edge/pass rusher, okay. You know, an elite one, okay. I hear you. Defensive tackles, you have got to be kidding me. Oh my goodness, that is just ridiculous. Let's see here. The impact of what impact did revenue sharing make on the portal spending? This is what one SEC and I collective said. My projections in November prior to the portal opening were about 50% too low. ACC NIL collective said, just because Wake Forest has $9 million to spend doesn't mean that we can double your client's salary. Big 12 personnel staffer said a huge impact. A lot of people were trying to spend their collective money not knowing what the rules were going to be. SEC personnel staffer says people are offloading money because of rev share. First off, it hasn't taken into effect. A lot of schools are offloading money. If you sign a wide receiver for $500,000 straight from rev share, so you have to go pay them now. Yeah, that'd be really, really silly to do that. And then finally, this last little section that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. What will be the biggest need in the spring transfer portal window? A lot of these sources are saying cornerbacks. Cornerbacks for sure. Let's see here. A center. It's kind of like, well, what does Tennessee need? Offensive line, but primarily cornerbacks. And, well, that stinks because Tennessee certainly needs a cornerback in the transfer portal. because Jamal McCoy may or may not be ready to start the season due to his offseason injury. I thought that was a very, very well done article there from Pete Nakos over at On3, talking to several different personnel staffers, collectives from different conferences around Power 4 and Group of 5 college football. I thought that was really, really well done. It does a great job of it's crazy the environment that we're living in right now. It is just nuts. It's wild. I thought Pete Nakos did a great job of portraying just that. Hey, when we come back, should spring practices and spring football games be done away with? Should college football go to an OTA model? The answer is absolutely. That and so much more is coming up next. We continue this Friday, Locked On Vols. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on all the action than over at FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting for me, whether I'm backing my favorite team for that late-game rally or picking up a player to hit in clutch 3. I never feel like I'm missing a chance. Plus, the app is super easy to use. When you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new customers over at FanDuel can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get started. That's FanDuel.com to shoot your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Not bad. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hey, we got a final segment here I want to hit on this Friday Locked On Vols. We won't spend too much time on it because we're kind of running out of time. But should college football do away with spring practices and the spring football game and go to a more OTA-style NFL calendar? I think so. I mean, amateurism's out the window already, okay? If you want a player in March, you're going to get a player in March. I mean, Tennessee had 2 players join their roster in the midterm of the spring semester last year. Like, my point is, sure, you've got to be enrolled in classes, but, that's not make or break anymore. If coaches want to find a way to get a player to campus, they're going to get a player to campus. So it's like there are no rules right now. And so I truly think that they should adopt this professional model, ditch amateurism altogether in terms of this, adopt the professional model, go to OTAs. That way, again, I'm not a strength and conditioning coach. I'm not a strength coach and all that, but I really feel like you're going to get more out of your off-season conditioning from a strength perspective. Because you got to change some things up. You're still working out. It's not like you're taking, a month off when you're doing spring practice, but the workouts do change. The lifts do change. If you're not doing football, you go into a different phase of lifting and all that. So I think you can get some more, pound for pound, no pun intended, bang for your buck if you aren't having any football in the spring semester and you can truly focus on weight room stuff. Now, again, the lifting doesn't stop. You continue to lift in the summer. You continue to lift in the season. That doesn't stop. But I'm going to get strong portion of the offseason can be uninterrupted. Plus, you get to shift to an OTA model, say in the month of June and July, okay? You replace those 15 spring practices with 15 OTA workouts like they do in the National Football League. Say you start in June, first week of June, go 4 days a week, okay? 4 times 4, that's 16. Boom, you got it done. Say you do 3 weeks in June. 4 times 3, that's 12. You got a couple more in the month of July. Say you do 3, you can get really creative with this. You can go 3 days a week, and the benefit there as well is you can showcase your OTAs, your workouts, treat it like a spring practice like you would in March and April by having those official visitors on to watch firsthand, watch the meetings, watch the practice and all that. Coaches truly need to focus on the recruiting aspect of official visits. That's why the month of June is so important in the recruiting calendar. But it's okay to have a 3-hour, 2.5-hour OTA Saturday morning. That way you're spending time with recruits on Friday nights. You can coach up your guys in OTAs on a Saturday morning and then spend time with recruits the end of Saturday on into Sunday. I think it could work. I think it'd be very beneficial. But you take these OTA-style workouts, replace what spring is, because at the end of the day, again, these teams are playing football, some teams, all the way into January if you're in the playoffs. Tennessee's last game was the 21st of December. Even for teams that aren't playing, you still are competing for a bowl game or whatever. You go home for a little bit. You don't start your true strength and conditioning plan until like January 15th, or in Tennessee's case, January 22nd. And then 6 weeks later, or 5 weeks later, you're putting the pads on and popping again. Like, you get more out of that time if you shift to this to this arena, in my opinion. So anyway, I think it'd be really interesting. There are some coaches here like Matt Rule of Nebraska that want to cancel the spring games because they're afraid of tampering. Quote, "The word tampering no longer exists," Rule said. "It's just absolute free, open, common market, so I don't necessarily want to open up the outside world. I don't want these guys all being able to watch our guys and say, wow, he looks like a pretty good player, let's go get him," talking about a spring game. I don't agree with that. This is coming from a head coach in the Sun Belt, quoted in a CBS article. Quote, "I respect Matt Rule, but if they want your players, they're going to get them whether you have a spring game or not." And that's exactly where I'm at. Like, is this 1950? Is this 1975? Is the only way that you can know about a player is if you go watch them with your own eyes? No, there's this thing called huddle. There's this thing called tape. There's this thing called social media. There's this thing called a DV mother flipping R that you can, there's this thing called YouTube. You can go and watch players all across the country. If they played football, you can go watch them. Okay? Nobody's sitting here like, oh boy, I got to turn on the SEC network. Got to watch Alabama spring game. Oh, I like that guy because of this spring game. I'm going to go and tamper with him and try to go get him to transfer to my school. Matt Rule, that is the stupidest argument I think I have ever heard. Now, to your point about wanting to get rid of spring games, there's something to it, okay? Coaches do not want to do spring games, all right? Josh Heupel doesn't want anybody to see anything. We get to see stretches when we're there. We get to see a little bit of individual when we are there. We do not get to see any of the scrimmages. The scrimmages, much like Senior Bowl practices, are when the money's made. You find out so much more about your team in the closed-door scrimmages. You have a couple of scrimmages throughout spring camp and fall camp. And then what the public and what the media we get to see in the quote-unquote orange and white game, I mean, it is basic. It is dumbed down. It is vanilla. Some of these guys don't even play. It's just a matter of, trying to get in and get out. There's another quote here. That I thought was interesting. I don't even want spring practice, a source told CBS Sports. No, that's not it. Anyway, there's another quote in here talking about tampering is not an issue with me in spring practice because, again, you can go and you can find players, there's tape of everybody everywhere. But I don't want anybody to get hurt. I don't want to play a meaningless football game. And it's sure, a lot of times you're not blitzing, you're not doing kickoffs and all that, but you don't want to play a type of football game trying to put on a show and have somebody get hurt. That is just silly. And I think that's a good point. But anyway, I think Matt Rule's reasoning for not wanting a spring game is super, super silly. But I do think that eventually it might not. You're seeing some programs this offseason like Nebraska canceling their spring games. Tennessee has a date for the orange and white game. That's going to be happening this year. I think eventually at some point Tennessee can follow this lead, and you'll get pushback from the fans, and that's fine because for so long it was like a fan day, right? You go to the orange and white game, you go down to the field after, you get autographs and all that. Well, all that, that hadn't been the case in years. You know what I'm saying? That has not been the case in years. So the nostalgia and the pageantry, there's still pageantry in college athletics. I know a lot of people will disagree with that, but I do think that there's some pageantry still left in college athletics. Not in this arena anymore. It's gone. So I think spring games are silly. I think that you shift the spring practices to the month of June and July, spread them out if you want to, or go bang, 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 3 weeks and be done, however you want to do it. But I think the OTA style model coupled with the official visiting weekends in the month of June would just be huge. I think it'd be a win, 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 win. And I think it's better for your off-season strength and conditioning for your athletes. So, yeah, I'm all for that. Will college football adopt an OTA model at some point? Yes, I wholeheartedly believe that. Will it be in the next 2 years, 3 years? Probably not. Probably not. But then again, we didn't think players would be getting paid like this. We didn't think there'd be a open market, a Wild Wild West like this. We didn't think that players could have unlimited transfers like they are right now. It is truly, truly a wild, wild time. So why not get a little bit wilder and wackier? Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Gals, thank you so much for being here. This is Locked On Vols. Tell that Tennessee fan in your life to watch this show. Subscribe to the channel. If you're watching us right now on YouTube, don't leave. Don't exit out. You stop that right now. Stop it. Hit subscribe, please. Let's get the show in front of more and more Tennessee fans. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever you're listening to us, hit subscribe. That's how the show continues to grow. Couldn't do the show without you. Everydayers, thank you so much. Got a wild weekend coming up. Tennessee Hoops, we'll recap it. We'll talk a little Tennessee baseball on Monday. All that and more right here on Locked On Vols.